This story is titled, My Ex-Wife Had Me Jailed for Child Support, until a DNA test proved I'm not the father, and now I am taking my revenge. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Throwaway account because some people involved know my main. Quick background since people always ask in the comments. I'm 34, former military turned private security contractor. Did 8 years in the Marines, including 3 tours overseas. Switched to private sector because the money was better, and I wanted to give my family a stable life. Always been the provider type. Gym 5 days a week since I was 17, own my house, drive normal cars, invest my money instead of buying designer crap. Met Sarah at 25 when I was transitioning out of the military. She was a receptionist at a doctor's office, seemed sweet and down to earth back then. She came from a middle-class family, had some college debt I helped pay off, and appeared to have normal, reasonable life goals. Boy, was I wrong about everything. You know those moments in movies where everything goes into slow motion and the character's whole world falls apart? Yeah, that's not how it happened. Reality hits way harder and way faster. It was a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays were always my longest days. 14-hour executive protection shifts for some tech CEO who thought everyone was out to get him. I'd been wearing a 25-pound tactical vest all day in 90-degree heat. My shoulders were on fire, and all I wanted was a hot shower and maybe an hour with Emma, my 4-year-old daughter, before her bedtime. I'd even stopped at that overpriced sushi place Sarah loved, dropped $80 on her favorite rolls, dragon rolls with extra eel sauce. Funny how you remember these useless details. She'd been distant for months, barely talking to me, always on her phone, but I was still trying to make things work. Military taught me never to give up, right? Walk through the door at 8:45 p.m., and there's Sarah, sprawled on our $3,000 leather couch that I paid for, scrolling through Instagram like it's her full-time job. She doesn't even look up when I put the sushi on the coffee table. I want a divorce. Just like that. 4 words. Didn't even put her phone down. 7 years together, 5 years married, a daughter we both adored, or so I thought. And she couldn't even give me the basic respect of eye contact while destroying our family. I stood there like an idiot, still in my tactical pants and company polo, sushi getting warm on the table. What? You heard me. Still scrolling. I've already talked to a lawyer. Here's what's going to happen. Then she finally looks up, and I see this expression, like she's enjoying this. Lists off her demands like she's ordering at Starbucks. The house, the one I bought with my military savings. The Lexus that I paid for. Primary custody of Emma. $3,200 a month in child support. Keep in mind, I was already paying. $2,800 mortgage. Both car payments, $580 for her Lexus, $320 for my Toyota. Emma's private preschool, $1,400 per month. Dance classes, $200 per month. All the utilities, all the groceries. Her gym membership, $150 per month for some fancy women's-only place. Her self-care expenses, weekly mani-pedis, monthly massage, hair appointments that cost more than my car payment. You're basically asking for everything, I said, trying to keep my voice level. 8 years of military discipline helps you keep your cool, even when your world's imploding. She just shrugged, finally putting her phone down. That's what my lawyer says I can get. Oh, and I want to adjust the custody schedule. Every other weekend for you should be enough. Every other weekend. I lost it there. Not violently. I've never been that guy. But I couldn't hold back anymore. Are you fucking kidding me? I'm the one who takes her to school every morning. I'm the one who stays up with her when she's sick. I'm the one who taught her to swim, who reads her stories, who takes her to the park every weekend while you're at yoga class. Sarah just picked her phone back up, completely unbothered. Yeah, well, the courts usually favor the mother. My lawyer says it's pretty standard. That's when I noticed something else. Emma wasn't home. It was 9 p.m. on a Thursday, and our 4-year-old wasn't in bed. Where's Emma? At my mom's. I figured this conversation might get emotional. She'd planned this whole thing, probably had this script ready for weeks. And there I was, still holding the stupid sushi bag, thinking I could fix whatever was wrong in our marriage. I set the sushi down, my appetite completely gone. How long have you been planning this? She gave me this smirk that made my blood boil. Long enough to know what I'm entitled to. Entitled. That word hit me like a punch to the gut. After everything I'd done, everything I'd sacrificed, she felt entitled to the life I'd built. I need some air, I said, turning to leave. I couldn't stand being in the same room with her anymore. Don't forget to pick up your things from the master bedroom, she called after me. I've moved them to the guest room. I spent that night driving around town, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My phone kept buzzing with texts from Sarah, each one more demanding than the last. When will you be back? We need to discuss the details. My lawyer wants to meet Monday. Be available. I expect you to be civil about this. Emma doesn't need to see Daddy having a meltdown. That last one nearly made me drive the car off the road, using Emma as a weapon already. That's when I knew this wasn't going to be a clean break. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyer meetings, paperwork, and watching Sarah systematically dismantle the life we'd built. She moved into the guest room and started going out more than ever. Every time I asked about Emma, it was always, she's at mom's, or she's having a play date. My first meeting with my lawyer, Richard, was a wake-up call. He'd been recommended by an old military buddy who'd gone through a similar situation. Look, Richard said, leafing through the initial paperwork Sarah's lawyer had sent over. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The demands she's making are excessive, but not unheard of. California family courts tend to favor mothers, unless there's clear evidence of unfitness. But I'm the primary caregiver, I insisted. I'm the one who's there for Emma day in and day out. Sarah's barely home 3 nights a week with all her classes and girls' nights. Richard sighed, taking off his glasses. Do you have documentation of that? Calendars, text messages, witness statements? I didn't. Like an idiot, I'd never thought I'd need to keep receipts on my own marriage. Start documenting everything now, Richard advised. Every time she leaves Emma with someone else, every time she breaks a commitment, every penny you spend on the household. We're going to need all of it. Meanwhile, Sarah was painting a very different picture for anyone who would listen. According to her, I was a controlling military type who never gave her freedom and used money to keep her dependent. The absolute opposite of reality. But her friends ate it up. Even some of our mutual friends started looking at me differently. The first custody exchange after we set up the temporary schedule? Man, that's burned into my memory forever. Sarah pulls up in my Lexus. Still can't believe I was paying for that thing. Wearing $200 Lululemon leggings and some designer workout top. Emma runs to me the second she sees me. Hadn't been allowed to see her for almost 2 weeks at that point. Sarah just stands there, tapping her foot like we're inconveniencing her. Here's her bag, she says, practically throwing it at me. I've packed her medicine for her allergies. Don't forget to give it to her exactly at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. And she needs to be in bed by 8:30. No sugar after 6. No screen time after 7. And make sure she does her dance stretches. I just stared at her. I'd been the one handling Emma's medicine schedule for the past 2 years because Sarah couldn't deal with the stress of remembering it. I was the one who figured out her allergy triggers, who found the right doctor, who set up the whole routine. Anything else you want to explain to me about my own daughter? I asked. She just gave me this look, like I was some hired help she had to explain things to. Just make sure she's ready by 6 p.m. on Sunday. I have yoga at 7. That yoga class she was always running off to? Yeah, we'll get to that later. The weekends with Emma were both heaven and hell. Heaven because I got to be with my little girl. Hell because I knew they were numbered. Every moment felt precious and terrifying at the same time. We'd build pillow forts in my new apartment, a depressing one-bedroom that cost way too much because I needed to stay in Emma's school district. We'd bake cookies, watch Disney movies, go to the park, trying to pack a whole week's worth of love and attention into 48 hours. Emma would ask about my day, tell me about her friends at school, show me the new dance moves she was learning. She seemed okay on the surface, but I could tell something was off. She was quieter than usual, clingier. Would wake up in the middle of the night asking if I was still there. Daddy, why don't I see you every day anymore? Emma asked one night as I was tucking her in. Broke my fucking heart. What do you tell a 4-year-old? That mommy's turned into someone we don't recognize? That daddy's trying his best but the system's rigged? Sometimes grown-ups need to live in different houses, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But I love you more than anything in the whole world. You know that, right? She nodded, hugging her stuffed elephant, the one I got her when she was born. I love you too, Daddy. Can you read me another story? I read her 3 more stories that night. Would have read her 100 if she'd asked. The drop-offs were always the worst. Emma would cling to me, crying, begging to stay longer. Sarah would stand there, checking her watch, acting like we were causing some huge inconvenience. She does this every time, Sarah would say, rolling her eyes. You're making it worse by dragging it out. Just go already. I started noticing changes in Emma after she'd been with Sarah. She'd come back with expensive new toys, but wearing the same clothes I'd sent her in, now dirty or stained. Her hair would be tangled, like no one had bothered to brush it. She'd be exhausted, cranky from lack of sleep. When I brought it up at our next court date, Sarah's lawyer smoothly interjected, "Your Honor, Mr. Last Name, is clearly trying to weaponize normal childhood behaviors against my client. Children get dirty, they play hard. Ms. Last Name is providing excellent care while also trying to rebuild her life after years of being financially controlled." The judge nodded sympathetically at Sarah, who had magically produced tears right on cue. I was learning fast that perception meant everything in family court, and Sarah was a master at manipulating perceptions. Each court appearance chipped away more of my rights. The temporary custody arrangement became semi-permanent. My child support payments increased. Sarah's demands grew more outlandish. She needed more money for Emma's activities, that I was never informed about, for educational supplies, that I never saw, for medical expenses, despite Emma being on my insurance. And through it all, I kept showing up, kept fighting, kept trying to be the dad Emma deserved, even as the system seemed determined to reduce me to nothing more than a paycheck. While all this was going down, I was still trying to keep my career together. Executive protection isn't like regular security work. You can't check out mentally. One mistake, and someone could get hurt, or worse. I was pulling 60 to 70-hour weeks, trying to bank extra money because I knew Sarah's demands would clean me out. The schedule was brutal. 5 a.m., wake up, hit the gym, couldn't let myself get soft. 6:30 a.m., get ready for work. 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., executive protection shifts. 9:30 p.m., try to FaceTime Emma before bed, when Sarah would allow it. 10 p.m., meal prep, try to sleep, fail, end up doing push-ups until exhaustion. The lack of sleep was getting to me. I'd catch myself zoning out during client briefings, missing details I never would have missed before. The divorce was consuming my thoughts, eating away at my focus. My boss, Mike, was an old military buddy who'd given me my start in the private sector. He pulled me aside one day after I nearly dozed off during a client briefing. "Brother, what's going on with you?" he asked. "Clients are starting to notice. You're not yourself." I told him everything. The divorce, the custody battle, Sarah's demands, all of it. Mike listened, that old sergeant's patience showing. "Look," he said finally, "you know I've got your back. But in our line of work, we can't afford distractions. These clients trust us with their lives. Take some time, get your head straight." He offered me 2 weeks of paid leave, more than generous in our industry. I spent it trying to get my life in order, meeting with Richard, organizing my finances, and trying to build a case for more custody. When I returned to work, I thought I had it under control. I was wrong. 3 weeks after coming back, I was assigned to a high-profile client, tech billionaire who'd received some death threats. Standard protective detail, something I could have handled in my sleep before all this. We were at a restaurant, client seated with his back to the wall as protocol dictated. I was scanning the room, doing all the right things on autopilot. Then my phone buzzed. Sarah, sending a photo of Emma at the hospital. No context. No explanation. Just my little girl looking scared, hooked up to monitoring equipment. I texted back, "What happened? Is she okay? Which hospital?" No response. Called. Straight to voicemail. Called her mother. No answer. I was freaking out, trying to maintain my professional composure while my insides were being shredded. Then I caught a movement from the corner of my eye. Someone approaching our table too fast, hand reaching inside their jacket. In any other circumstance, my training would have kicked in automatically. I would have stepped between the threat and the client, neutralized the situation. Instead, I hesitated. Just for a split second, but in our line of work, that's all it takes. Turned out the guy was just a fan wanting an autograph, pulling out a notebook, not a weapon. Crisis averted, but my client noticed the delay. So did my team lead. Later that night, after confirming Emma was fine, it was just a routine checkup. Sarah's way of screwing with me. I got the call from Mike. "This isn't working, man. I'm sorry." 2 months later, I'm called into the office. 2 clients had complained about my lack of focus. 15 years of perfect service. 8 in the Marines, 7 in private security. And just like that, I'm out. The severance was decent, but with Sarah's demands and the legal fees piling up, it wouldn't last long. "Is there anything I can do?" I asked Mike, hating how desperate I sounded. He looked genuinely sorry. "Not right now. Get your personal life sorted, then we can talk. This industry's small. People remember both the good and the bad." I cleared out my desk while my now former colleagues awkwardly avoided eye contact. 15 years of exemplary service, multiple commendations, A spotless record, all wiped out because Sarah couldn't be bothered to send a follow-up text about our daughter being in the hospital. When I confronted her about it later, she just shrugged. I thought you should know she was at the doctor. Not my fault you overreacted. I lost my job because of that stunt, I told her, trying to keep my voice down because Emma was in the next room. Sarah actually smiled. Well, that should make for an interesting conversation in court when you try to explain why you can't afford child support anymore. That's when I realized she'd done it deliberately. She wanted me to lose my job, wanted me to fail, because then she could paint me as the deadbeat dad who couldn't keep it together, couldn't provide for his kid. It was all part of her plan. The job market for specialized security work is weird. Either you're in or you're out, and word travels fast. A few of my old contacts tried to help, but nobody wants to take a chance on a guy going through a messy divorce. I started applying for everything: mall security, night watchman, bouncer, anything to keep the money coming in. Most places wouldn't touch me. Overqualified was the common response. What they meant was too expensive or flight risk once something better comes along. Finally landed a gig doing overnight security at a storage facility. Minimum wage, no benefits, graveyard shift. A far cry from executive protection, but it was something. The schedule was brutal in a different way. Working nights meant I barely saw daylight, barely slept. The few weekend days I had with Emma, I was a zombie, forcing myself to stay awake and present for her. 4 months of nothing but rejections and watching my savings drain away. Richard, my lawyer, started making noises about his fees. The apartment complex sent notices about late rent. The child support payments kept coming due, no matter how empty my bank account was. The first time I missed a child support payment, Sarah blew up my phone with texts. "Where's my money? I knew you'd turn out to be a deadbeat. Hope you enjoy jail. Emma deserves better than you." Each message felt like a knife. I'd never missed a payment for anything in my life. Had a perfect credit score. Always paid my bills early. Now I was the guy who couldn't provide for his kid. I went to court to explain the situation, ask for a temporary reduction until I could get back on my feet. Brought all my job applications, rejection letters, bank statements showing I was nearly wiped out. Sarah showed up in another designer outfit, her lawyer looking smug next to her. "Your Honor," her lawyer started, "what we have here is a classic case of voluntary unemployment. Mr. Last Name deliberately took a lower-paying position to avoid his obligations to his child. He's working beneath his qualifications by choice." The judge looked at me skeptically. "Is that true, Mr. Last Name?" I tried to explain about the job loss, about the industry blacklisting, about applying for everything I could find, but it all sounded like excuses, even to my own ears. "The child support order stands," the judge ruled. "If you fall into arrears, there will be consequences." Consequences. Right. I picked up a second job, stocking shelves at a grocery store during the day before heading to the storage facility at night. 4 hours of sleep became the norm. My health started to suffer. Lost weight, dark circles under my eyes, constant fatigue. Emma noticed. During one of our weekends, she touched my face, concerned. "Daddy, are you sick?" I forced a smile. "Just a little tired, sweetheart. Daddy's working a lot right now." "Is it because of the money Mommy says you owe her? She told Grandma you're not paying for my dance classes anymore." That hurt worse than anything. Sarah using Emma as a pawn, making her worry about adult problems. I made sure never to speak ill of Sarah in front of Emma, but she had no such reservations about poisoning our daughter against me. 2 more missed payments, and the warnings from the court got more serious. I sold my car, sold my watch, sold anything of value just to catch up. Started surviving on ramen and peanut butter sandwiches. Picked up odd jobs on my days off, mowing lawns, painting houses, whatever paid cash. Then came that morning. 8 a.m., loud pounding on my apartment door. I was already up, actually. Old military habits die hard, even when you're depressed. 2 cops standing there, looking uncomfortable. "Sir, we have a warrant for your arrest for failure to pay child support." The younger cop clearly didn't want to be there. Maybe he'd heard about my military service. Small town, word gets around. The older one just looked tired, like he'd done this too many times. They were professional about it, at least. Let me change into proper clothes, didn't make a scene. But walking out of my apartment building in handcuffs? That shit hits different. The holding cell was everything you'd expect. Cold, smelly, depressing. But the worst part? Sitting there thinking about Emma. What would Sarah tell her? That Daddy's a criminal? That he didn't love her enough to pay? I tried calling Richard from the jail phone, but his secretary said he couldn't represent me anymore due to my outstanding legal bills. Perfect. The public defender they assigned me looked about 12 and had a caseload that would break a seasoned attorney. He barely glanced at my file before our court appearance. Just tell the judge you'll pay, he advised during our 5-minute consultation. That's all they want to hear. With what money? I asked. I'm already working 2 jobs. I've sold everything I own. He shrugged, already looking past me to his next case. Figure it out, or you'll be back here in a month. The judge was unimpressed with my situation. Mr. Last Name, the court doesn't care how you meet your obligations, only that you do. Your child deserves support. I wanted to scream about all the ways I'd supported Emma that had nothing to do with money, about the bedtime stories and swimming lessons and doctor visits, about how Sarah was using the system to destroy me while pretending it was all about Emma's welfare. Instead, I just nodded and promised to pay. 3 days in county jail before a former military buddy found out and posted my bail. 3 days of missing work and therefore not getting paid. Of missing a scheduled weekend with Emma, of sinking even lower than I thought possible. County jail gives you a lot of time to think. I kept to myself, did push-ups in my cell, tried to maintain some kind of routine. The other guys mostly left me alone. Maybe they could tell I wasn't the usual type they got in there. When I got out, there was a stack of mail waiting at my apartment. Bills, mostly, and a thick envelope with no return address. Then came the letter from Jake. Jake was my old teammate from the security company, one of the few guys I truly trusted. The letter was thick, and as soon as I started reading, I understood why. Brother, I've been carrying this for too long. You deserve to know the truth. Jake laid it all out. He'd been doing security for some high-end hotel events, and he'd seen Sarah there, multiple times, with her yoga instructor, Brad. But they weren't doing yoga. The first time I saw them, I thought I was mistaken. But then it kept happening. Different hotels, different events, but always them. Always looking too close to be just friends. I took photos, kept a log of dates and times. I know this is going to hurt, but there's more. The next part of the letter made me physically sick. The timeline doesn't add up. Sarah was seeing Brad before Emma was born. Way before. I've got security footage timestamps that prove it. I've been sitting on this info for years, man. When you guys seemed happy, I couldn't bring myself to wreck your family. But now that she's putting you through hell, you deserve to know what you're fighting for. Inside the envelope were dozens of photos. Sarah and Brad at hotels, restaurants, shopping together. Some dated from before our wedding. Some from when she was pregnant. Some from just weeks ago. Sitting in my crappy apartment, looking at those photos, everything started making sense. All those late-night yoga classes. The weird work schedule she claimed Brad had. The way she'd get defensive if I ever suggested joining one of her classes. And Emma? God, Emma. I stared at her photo on my nightstand, really looking at her features for the first time with this new knowledge in mind. Her blue eyes, mine are brown. Her hair color, lighter than mine or Sarah's. The way she smiled, always thought she got that from my mom. Had I been willfully blind all these years? Had I seen what I wanted to see because I loved that little girl so damn much? I called Jake immediately, my hands shaking so bad I could barely dial. Why now? I asked when he picked up. Why not when it could have saved me all this hell? Jake sounded genuinely remorseful. I thought about it every day, man. But you seemed happy. You loved that kid so much. I couldn't be the one to destroy that. Then when the divorce happened, I figured you guys had your reasons, that maybe things had just run their course naturally. So what changed? I saw Sarah and Brad at another event last week. Overheard them laughing about you, about how they were taking you for everything. That's when I knew I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I sat with this information for a whole day, trying to process it. Part of me wanted to confront Sarah immediately, to scream and rage at her for the years of lies. But the Marine in me, the tactician, knew better. This was ammunition, possibly the only kind that could help me in this war she'd started. I went to the storage facility that night, worked my shift in a daze. When morning came, instead of going home to sleep, I went to a different lawyer's office, one recommended by Jake, who specialized in paternity fraud. The second I got out of jail, I contacted a new lawyer, showed him Jake's letter, the photos, everything. He didn't sugarcoat it. This is going to get ugly, he said. But if what your friend documented is true, we can probably get the child support orders thrown out. First thing we need is a DNA test. Getting the test ordered wasn't easy. Sarah fought it hard, claimed I was just trying to avoid my responsibilities. But the judge looked at Jake's evidence and approved it. The 2 weeks waiting for results were the longest of my life. I spent hours staring at photos of Emma, looking for, I don't know what, signs, clues, some hint that I should have seen. I didn't sleep much during those weeks. The results came in a plain white envelope. Medical terminology, lots of numbers, but only one that mattered. 0.00% probability of paternity. I didn't cry, didn't yell, didn't do anything for about an hour. Just sat there, holding that paper, feeling like someone had ripped my heart out. When I finally could move again, I called my lawyer. His tone changed immediately when I told him the results. "This changes everything," he said. "We're going to file to vacate all child support orders. And if she's been collecting from the biological father too, we're looking at fraud charges." The lawyer called later that day. "We did some digging. She's been collecting child support from Brad too. Double dipping the whole time. This is fraud, clear and simple." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal activity. Subpoenas flying, bank records being pulled, Sarah's carefully constructed house of cards beginning to collapse. Through it all, I couldn't stop thinking about Emma. Biologically, she wasn't mine, but in every way that mattered, every bedtime story, every scraped knee, every middle-of-the-night comfort, she was my daughter. The thought of never seeing her again was unbearable. "What about custody?" I asked my lawyer during one of our meetings. He gave me a sympathetic but realistic look. "Legally, you have no standing now that paternity has been disproven. But given the circumstances, the fraud, the potential criminal charges, we might be able to make a case for some kind of visitation based on the established relationship. It's a long shot, though. Long shot or not, I had to try." Emma was the only thing in this whole mess worth fighting for. Court day was surreal. Sarah showed up in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, fresh from some expensive salon appointment. Her lawyer tried spinning this story about her being confused about paternity, claiming she truly believed I was Emma's father. Then, my lawyer started laying out the evidence. Bank statements showing child support deposits from both me and Brad, hotel receipts going back years, security footage from multiple locations, text messages between Sarah and Brad discussing their plan, medical records showing she knew about the paternity all along. The judge's face got darker with each piece of evidence. By the end, he wasn't even trying to hide his disgust. "Mrs. I last name, what you've done here goes beyond simple fraud. You've intentionally deceived two men, manipulated the court system, and most importantly, used an innocent child as a pawn in your scheme. This court takes a very dim view of such actions." Then came the most satisfying moment of the entire ordeal. The judge looked directly at Sarah, his expression harder than I'd seen in all our previous appearances. "The court finds clear and convincing evidence of fraud. All child support orders are hereby vacated. Mr. Last Name is entitled to restitution for all payments made, plus interest. Furthermore, I am referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution." Sarah's face went white. This wasn't how her script was supposed to play out. She'd been so certain of her victory, so confident in her ability to manipulate the system, that she hadn't prepared for this outcome. "But, Your Honor," her lawyer stammered, "my client is the primary caregiver for a young child. Surely you wouldn't—" "Counsel," the judge interrupted, "your client has committed fraud against this court and against two individuals. The fact that she has a child doesn't grant her immunity from the consequences of her actions." Sarah was arrested right there in the courtroom. The schadenfreude was so intense, I could practically taste it. 3 years for fraud. But here's where karma really kicked in. During booking, they found her designer purse stuffed with illegal pills. Not just a few, but enough to add intent to distribute charges. That 3-year sentence turned into 7 real quick. The best part? Brad disappeared to Mexico when the child support orders came down. Apparently, he had his own legal issues we didn't know about. 2 weeks ago, I got a call from Sarah's sister. Sarah's found God in prison, wants to apologize, wants my help getting her sentence reduced, claims she's a changed woman who sees the error of her ways. You know what I told her sister? New phone, who dis? As for Emma, her situation initially broke my heart. With her mom in prison and her biological dad in the wind, she was headed for foster care. Despite not being her biological father, I petitioned the court for custody based on my established relationship with her and the fact that I was the only stable parent figure she'd ever known. It was an uphill battle. The system isn't designed for situations like ours. But sometimes, just sometimes, the right thing prevails. Emma's living with me now. Full custody since both biological parents are out of the picture. It's not easy explaining to a 4-year-old why mommy's gone, but we're making it work. I've got a new job managing security for a major hotel chain. Better hours, better pay, home every night. The best revenge? Emma's thriving. Her teachers say she's happier than ever. She's making friends, doing great in her activities, and actually sleeping through the night now, something that never happened when Sarah was around. And Sarah? Last I heard, prison food isn't quite up to her usual standards. Guess karma really is the ultimate gold digger.